I invite you to try to answer this question. Here's a map of a system of roads that links the suburbs within a city. The map shows the travel time in minutes at 7 a.m. on each section of road. So, for example, it's 8 minutes from Noble to Sakharov. Julio lives in Silver, Maria lives in Lincoln, and Don lives in Noble. They want to meet in a suburb on the map, and no one wants to travel for more than 15 minutes. Where could they meet? I'll give you 90 seconds to try to find an answer. So how many of you found an answer? It's pretty good. The answer is Silver or Park. And there are several different ways to get these answers, but here are two that I've highlighted. The green shows one possible pathway to Silver, and the blue shows one possible pathway to Park. This is a question featured on the PISA test. PISA, or Program for International Student Assessment, is an international survey that aims to evaluate education systems worldwide by testing students' skills and knowledge. Every 3 years, a random sample of 15-year-old students from around the world take tests in reading, science, and math. About 7 hours worth of test material is originally created, but students only take 2 hours worth of them. So each student's test is different. Students and principals also answer a background questionnaire to help countries explore factors that may affect performance, such as gender and attitudes about school. As opposed to other tests, PISA is not directly related to school curriculum and is designed to assess a student's ability to apply their knowledge to real-life situations. This way, countries are able to compare their students' performance and assess the impact of education policy decisions. There are 6 levels of questions, with level 1 being the simplest and level 6 being the most complex. This question I just asked you was a level 1 problem-solving question. In 2012, 94% of students in the United States who took the PISA test scored at or above a level 1. Compared to 98% in Singapore, Japan, and Korea. By the time you get to level 3, this grade gap increases. The children in Korea, Japan, and Singapore are scoring at about 80%. The US has now dropped to 59%. And the gap only gets worse by level 6. So what does this mean for the United States, and what can we do about it? I read the book, The Smartest Kids in the World by Amanda Ripley to gain perspective on the United States' education system compared to the rest of the world. In some countries, children are learning to thrive in their economies, to think critically and solve problems. Amanda Ripley, an investigative journalist from Time and The Atlantic and other magazines, conducted research to help find out what was different about these countries and how the United States could change for the better. In addition, she followed 3 American foreign exchange students in 3 of these education superpowers, South Korea, Poland, and Finland, to get inside information on these education systems. Ripley analyzed countries' PISA scores to further understand the impact of a good education system. To demonstrate the difference between the United States and other education superpowers, she included a graph of various countries' PISA scores over a course of 50 years. I'm going to focus on 2 of the countries, Finland and Finland and Korea, visited by exchange students, and the United States. Finland is the utopia model. Everyone wants to know what they're doing right. Teams of American educators have traveled to Finland to ask questions and bring back information. In the 1970s, Finland's leaders wanted to reform their education system, so they started with their teacher training system. Teacher training colleges became much harder to get into, and nowadays it's almost as hard to get into a Finland teacher training college as it is to get into MIT. This new teacher training system means that teachers are paid well and highly respected, and Ripley reports that all students, even the stoners, buy into school and they start doing their work. The system trusts the teachers, and students trust the system, and as a result, there is little need for standardized testing in Finland. South Korea puts a tremendous amount of pressure on students for education. Ripley refers to it as the hamster wheel. Imagine what that would look like, constantly spinning with no end in sight. Students begin school at 8 in the morning each morning and finish at 4. But the school day doesn't end there. After 4 o'clock, they attend private study sessions and tutoring academies called hagwons. This is where most of their learning takes place, Ripley observed. After their secondary school experience, they take a college entrance exam. And this is what all of their education leads to. On the day of the exam, there is no school for younger students, and the stock market opens an hour late in order to allow the roads to clear up. Even air traffic is grounded during the English listening exam to reduce unnecessary noise. This shows the degree to which the whole culture buys into the shared goal of academic success. Finally, Poland may seem like a surprise to include, but it's a big success with PISA scores. Its poverty rate is comparable to that of the US, so it proves to be a good comparison. I noticed that the Polish education system makes failure acceptable in a way that's a little tough for Americans to understand. The foreign exchange student in Poland, whose name was Tom, learned this the hard way. His teacher asked him to solve a math problem on the board, and like other American students, Tom wasn't very good at math. He started falling behind in middle school, and soon he started failing his classes, so he never caught up. When he couldn't solve the problem on the Polish whiteboard, he felt an inner trauma, a private trauma. But unlike their American classmate, these Polish students don't feel this private trauma. Tests are graded on a scale of 1 to 5 in Poland, with 5 being the highest, and no one ever gets a 5. Furthermore, test scores are always reported out loud so everyone can hear them. Ripley observed that kids in Poland are used to failing because of this. The logic makes sense. If the work is hard, then routine failure is the only way to learn. In each of these examples, students really valued their education, despite the differences in how these educations were achieved. So, after reading Ripley's book, I became interested in what Shepaug students value about their education. I wanted to draw parallels between Ripley's beliefs and Shepaug's needs. I collected my own data by distributing a survey to the high schoolers during an advisory period. My questions were designed to reveal what students need or want in an education without feeding them answers or putting words in their mouths. And here are the questions that I asked. I asked for gender and grade, qualities of a good classroom experience, what % of class time students spend actively engaged, what teachers could do to keep them more engaged, how they know they're learning, and what motivates them to work harder. So these were the results I obtained. I first put them into a big spreadsheet. I received 182 responses, which is about 62% of the Shepaug population, and it was my job to make sense of them. So I started by putting them in an Excel spreadsheet and listing the common answers that I received. So here are the results that I obtained. First, these are the % of responses from each grade. As you can see, the juniors didn't give as many responses as I would have liked, but it didn't impact the results too much. In addition, I had an almost 50-50 split, male and female. 50% male, 50% female. So there was almost no influence by gender on my results. First, my results for the % of class time that students spend engaged. Here is a graph reporting my findings with a student's grade and the % of the sample that indicated a given response. So 0 to 25% is not engaged at all. 26 to 50% somewhat engaged, moving up to mostly engaged and engaged almost all the time. So I'll walk you through mostly engaged. When students arrive in high school, they're pretty engaged. They want to work for their grades. It's the beginning of high school. They want to work really hard. As a result, nearly 40% of students are trying pretty hard. As they get older, they start taking standardized tests. The SATs come up. A smaller proportion are mostly engaged. But then that proportion rises again by 12th grade, just in time for the college application process and the end of high school. And here's the final graph again. Next, what students find effective in a classroom experience. I noticed that students are looking for various teaching methods in their classrooms. They want school to be fun. They need activities and discussions, movies, participation in general. It helps them connect to their classroom experience and when they're not just sitting and listening to a lecture. Next, how students know they're learning. I took the top 6 responses out of about 30, and I discovered many students want to be engaged in the process of learning, understanding, and applying new material. It helps them learn when they're applying new knowledge, and they're driven by this continuous process of school. Also, remembering information later is of great importance to students, as are grades. About 9% say grades indicate that they're learning. What could make students more engaged? Connections. Connections to their real lives, sports, extracurriculars. It keeps them more interested in school, and it makes the material seem more relevant to them. so they'll be more engaged and they'll learn a lot more. And the greatest response was, again, various teaching methods, activities, and movies and projects. A great proportion, almost 30% of the students said that activities would keep them more engaged. And what motivates students to work harder? Again, connecting the material and knowing that it will be relevant in college and beyond. Finally, teachers and families can influence students to work harder and to apply their knowledge later on. If a teacher can influence a student, then their passion may drive the student to learn more about a topic or pursue it further. So we see that at Shepaug, students want to be engaged and connected to their course material. Using varied teaching methods, as I mentioned, such as videos, projects, and discussions, help keep them engaged, like the students in the Education Superpowers. And many are motivated by the opportunity to learn and apply new knowledge. Grades also play an important role. Students are willing to work hard for grades, yet I noticed they don't link grades as strongly to their own experience of learning. I'm still processing what my research might mean for Shepaug. I can't make policy recommendations based on these results, and education systems are very complex and in constant need of changing. There are many ways to approach policy planning. Amanda Ripley focused on PISA results to compare countries with different cultures and priorities. Here are some results from Ripley's research that I want to share. First, school should have a purpose. Students in Finland, Korea, and Poland take school more seriously because it is more serious, and it's more serious because everyone agrees that it should be. When school has a purpose, it can introduce more sophisticated curriculum that makes kids think and prepares them for the future after they graduate. Second, American schools should rethink failure. Students in the United States consider failure demoralizing and try to avoid it at all costs. And even if they do fail, there are a few obvious consequences. This moon bounce, as Ripley calls it, misleads kids. The real world doesn't always give second and third chances. Kids in the Education Superpowers, especially Poland, understand this. Finally, Ripley emphasizes rigor. This can start with remodeling teacher education, as in Finland. Finland's competitive education program led to more rigorous hands-on training for teachers. With this training, they have the tools to challenge their students and prepare them for the future. Rigor is important to teaching modern skills, and a core consensus is the only way we can achieve that. Many people talk about rigor these days. There's even a word for it in Finnish called sisu. We don't have an English language equivalent for it, but it can be roughly translated to grit, a combination of bravery and tenacity. But you can't have and sustain rigor without student engagement. It just doesn't happen. I realize this research is only the beginning to resolving a very complicated issue. Here are a few questions we can answer in the future to move forward. What does fun mean in a classroom? A good number of the surveys I collected said a classroom should be fun. And when I think of fun, I imagine engaged and relating to the material, so I'm enjoying myself, but it could vary from school culture to school culture. And does it vary by subject? Second, we pay a lot of attention to what schools and teachers should do, and that's what I've focused on. But the other side of the argument is, what can parents do? How does a child's home life impact their education? And how do we study this, especially at a large scale? So, what's tomorrow going to look like in education? Well, I'm graduating in 3 weeks, so it's up to you to decide. Thank you.